And we know that her numbers are going to grow in the House come the 4th. Chub Peabody from Hollis, and you heard him speak very ably just a little while ago on everything he's going to do for us in the Senate. Leo Lessard, the minority leader in the Senate. And Leo is retiring, but he served the state of New Hampshire and the Democratic Party very well, and we hope he'll stay active and run again for office in the near future. My friend Rick Boyer from Nashua. Rick is also retiring and has done a superb job for the city of Nashua in the Senate, and we're disappointed to see that he is going to retire, but he will be succeeded by a very able Senator, Mary Nelson, who is here in the audience. I think coming in is Lawrence Craig Green, who's the 2nd District nominee for representative. Senator Simon from Illinois. Now, Norm DeMoore is going to represent or introduce Senator Simon, but as I mentioned to him, and I'm sure he was not aware of this before today, I am a native of Illinois. I grew up in Illinois, and Illinois is a very diverse and interesting political state, and I think Senator Simon is from downstate, but I came from a town, Arlington Heights, which is outside Chicago, in the suburbs, and that is Republican country, I'll tell you that. I think that congressional district, which is represented by a notorious Republican, was one of only the 13 congressional districts, as I recall it, in the United States for Goldwater in 1964. Republicans, and I'm sure they voted for Goldwater. And as I was thinking back to this, Senator Simon's visit stirred up all these old memories. But I recall when I was 6 or 7 years old, when Stevenson was running in 1956, the indoctrination in this district was so heavy that as a 6-year-old, we were, and my friends and I were going around singing these little songs, one of which was sung to the tune of Whistle While You Work. Now, the Democratic candidate was Stevenson, a great Democrat from Illinois, but even in Illinois, in this district, the tune Whistle While You Work, it had this little song, and the closing line was, Stevenson's a jerk. Now, I don't know how they got us to sing that song, but that shows you what that district was like. And if Senator Simon can win in that state, we know he's a very promising and successful and great candidate and a great Democrat. So, Chris Spiro, whom we all know, the chairman of the convention and our last Democratic nominee for governor. George Bruno, the chairman of the state party. And Ann Burke from the Manchester Board of Aldermen. Ann is the chair of the lunch and is also the first woman to be elected, along with Leona Dykstra, to the Manchester Board of Aldermen. And Ann was actually sworn in and therefore was the first woman to serve on the Manchester Board of Aldermen. I've always believed that the municipal boards of aldermen, the city councils are good places to get Democrats started, and we've got some great talent on the Manchester Board of Aldermen. We have some great talent on the National Board of Aldermen. We have the Democratic Senate nominee, Barbara Presley, from the National Board of Aldermen. And we have Bill Marklew, who's running for County Commissioner. So these are great proving grounds for Democrats. With that, I'd like to introduce again Norm DeMoore, who is going to introduce Senator Simon.
Thank you very much, Mayor Donchis and Democrats of the state of New Hampshire. It really is a deep and great pleasure for me to introduce my good friend Paul Simon to you today. We were elected to the U.S. Congress in 1974 at the same time, and we served many years together in that body. We decided at the same time to run for the United States Senate. Paul with a little more success than I was able to achieve. But I want you to know that it's difficult to introduce a good friend, and Paul is a good friend. Somehow it's easier to introduce strangers, but let me tell you a little bit about Paul Simon, in case Jim Donchis missed something. Paul Simon is probably one of the national leaders of the Democratic Party who has the ability to forge a partnership between the ideas the Democrats have had for years, in which we still defend, and the need to bring those ideas into a 20th century context to make them work. The Democratic Party has not fundamentally changed, but there has been a need to find leaders who can relate traditional party principles to the present realities. Paul Simon is one of those people, and he's exhibited that time and again. He's also a person of great courage. You know, it wasn't easy. You heard his district described by Jim Donchis. It was not easy to decide in 1984 to run against Chuck Percy, an institution in the state of New Hampshire and a very well nationally known U.S. Senator. But undaunted by the fact that he came from a district, as you've heard described, Paul Simon made the decision to do so. It wasn't easy for Paul Simon when we were debating the acid rain issue, coming from a state that is not very friendly to efforts to do something about acid rain, given their coal mining. Well, Paul's district is in the heart of that coal mining area, and yet Paul Simon, when he was in the House of Representatives and he continues in the Senate, to stand alone and to have the courage from Illinois to speak in favor of a reasonable, environmentally safe acid rain policy. This is no ordinary member of Congress. This is no ordinary member of the United States Senate. I don't want to spend an awful lot of time here, but I certainly could, talking about his writings, talking about his work on education, and his expertise in the area of education, his expertise in the area of immigration, his expertise in a number of areas that frankly outshines much other sources of expertise in this country. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to tell you that we have here in New Hampshire a present, and I certainly hope a future, national leader of the Democratic Party who has all that it takes to help to bring our party as quickly as possible back into the forefront, back into the leadership that it has for years held and is about in the next few years to recapture. So please help me to bring my good friend, my close friend, into New Hampshire with a rousing New Hampshire welcome for Senator Paul Simon.
Thank you very, very much, Norm, for that generous introduction. Mr. Mayor, Chris, Spiro, George Bruno, your able state chairman who won an important, I don't know how many people know this, an important Supreme Court decision some years ago, 9-0. Not very often that happens. And all the distinguished guests at this head table, Mary, Larry, and Chubb, and I'm going to talk about you people just a little bit here again, Leo and Rick and friends all. First of all, it is great to be introduced by Norm Demores. I had a real honor to serve with Norm Demores, and what a mistake the people of New Hampshire made when they didn't elect Norm Demores to United States Senate. And I appreciate that introduction because in public life you never know what kind of an introduction you're going to receive. I spoke to a convention a few years ago about one of the books I had written, and the president of the group in introducing me became unintentionally accurate, something you should never do in introducing a speaker. But in describing my book, he said it's the kind of a book, once you put it down, you can't pick it up. I am pleased to be in New Hampshire on a beautiful day like this. Back a few years ago, before I served in the House with Norm, I lectured for one semester at Harvard, and our family used to come up to New Hampshire on weekends and explore New Hampshire. You have a magnificent, gorgeous state, and it is great to be here once again. Let me also say that it was good to serve, even though I was on the House side, with John Durkin from your state. Good to be here to see at least a few old friends. Bob and Francis Shane I've known for a long time. Joe Grandison is around here somewhere. Others in this audience I've had a chance to meet through the years. Pleased to be here, and I hear good things about that race for governor, and Paul McCachran, I hope you do the trick because New Hampshire needs that voice. Jim Demers and Larry Craig Green, we need every vote we can get in the U.S. House of Representatives. I don't know how many of you saw the day before yesterday in the House, the huge bill passed, $530 billion, I think, or $540 billion. You know how many votes it passed by? 1 vote. Jim's opponent, incidentally, happens to be the only New England member of the U.S. House of Representatives who voted against the Higher Education Act, to give young people in this nation a chance to go to college. I don't think that's what the people of New Hampshire, his district, want. And let me add, you have not only an opportunity in 2 House members, you have an opportunity in this unusual man who is a candidate for the United States Senate here in Chubb Peabody. The President has just vetoed the South African sanctions bill. And frankly, you know, we're going through, without that sanctions bill, we're going through the same thing we went through when Hitler was in power. We were making nice, pious statements, oh, what you're doing is wrong, but we didn't put any economic muscle in back of it. And we have to do that. And there wouldn't be any questions from reporters here about how Chubb Peabody would vote on overriding a sanctions bill in South Africa. He'd be with us heart and soul, and you know it, and I know it, and the people of this state know it, I trust. And it seems to me only fair that New Hampshire, that gave Daniel Webster to Massachusetts, it's only fair that Massachusetts should give Chubb Peabody to New Hampshire. And we want to have and we need a Democratic United States Senate, and we hope you'll do your share on that. Candidates for the Executive Council here: Ed Theobald, Bob Savage, Lou D'Alessandro, and Stephanie Powers. Good to be with all of you here. Now I gather that in your state, this question of nuclear energy is one of those items on the agenda. We have three things that are wrong with nuclear energy today. One is its expense. It's too expensive. Number two is, and you have seen it in this talk about the evacuation plan. And I picked up the Boston Globe this morning and read where the governor wants to cut that evacuation plan down to 2 miles. And let me say to Chubb and to your candidates here, if you want, I will be pleased to ask the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to take a look to see if that complies with the law so we can take a good, hard look. It does not make sense to have a 2-year evacuation plan. And of course, the third nuclear danger is long-term. I don't want that nuclear waste next to my home. You don't want it next to your home. I don't want it to be imposing it on anyone else. And what we need and what we do not have, amazingly, we do not have an energy policy in this country. Just very fundamental. What happens tomorrow if there's a revolution in Saudi Arabia? I have no reason to believe there's going to be one. But what happens? The United States is not prepared. We are pretending that oil is going to be there indefinitely. We just have no policy. And I think if we had people like these two candidates for the House and Chubb Peabody, we'd have at least a little better chance for moving in a sensible direction. Well, beyond that, let me chat with you for about a few other things. It's been 306 years since King Charles II made New Hampshire a separate colony. And for all the contributions that you have made in those 306 years, you have, I think, in the coming, this year, this election, the election 2 years from now, you have the opportunity to do more than you've done in the past 306 years in giving this nation a sense of direction. For whatever reasons, historically, the reality is New Hampshire has an inordinate impact on the nation. And I think here is a place, and frankly, I had to weigh a decision this afternoon because we're voting on the conference bill on the tax measure this afternoon. I had to weigh, do I go down there to cast my vote even though it's going to carry overwhelmingly, or do I come up here? And I made a decision to come up here because I think you're very important to the future of this country. Where do we go from here? That's the fundamental question. They tell the story about Mark Twain. We just celebrated the 150th anniversary of the birth of Mark Twain. Mark Twain got his first job outside of working in the river, working for a newspaper in Carson City, Nevada. After he'd been in Carson City a few weeks, he wrote to his best friend in his hometown of Hannibal, Missouri. And he said, "Carson City is unbelievable. Carson City has booze. Carson City has wild women. Carson City has 24-hour-a-day gambling." He said, "This is no place for a Presbyterian." And then he added, "And so I no longer am one." I am not here to convert anyone to being a Presbyterian. I am here to suggest there are 4 things I think our party has to stand for. One is conviction. There are those who say we have to follow the polls and we got to shift a little to the right or shift a little to the left, and then we're going to be acceptable to the people of this nation. Let me tell you, I couldn't disagree with that more. If we simply put our finger to the wind and say, what's popular today? The American people simply aren't going to trust us. And for those who say there is a shift to the right or a shift to the left, my friends, the American people, and I think I can judge this reasonably well in Illinois, and I'll explain why in a minute, the American people basically don't care whether you're a conservative or a liberal. What they want are practical answers to practical problems. And they're willing to follow people who believe something. If I had known, I was just telling Rick and Leo up here, if I had known what Ronald Reagan was going to carry Illinois by, I probably wouldn't have become a candidate for the United States Senate. A lot of people ask, how could so many people vote for Ronald Reagan and also for Paul Simon? I think one of the reasons I won is that I didn't follow the advice of my campaign people. I stood for what I believed, and somehow the people understood that and they voted for me. If the Democratic Party tries to become simply a carbon copy of the Republican Party, we will not win and we should not win. We have to take leadership. That means taking some unpopular stands. And if I can refer to this bill, it's up to date. And I know there are people who differ with me on this here, and I respect those of you who differ with me on this. But I was one of 3 votes against the tax bill that passed the Senate when it passed the Senate. And I recognize my vote was not a popular vote. Why be one of 3 votes against something that's carrying overwhelmingly? Well, I think there are good reasons for standing up, as the state legislators here know. Let me say, first of all, I don't think to massively overhaul the tax code and do absolutely nothing with a deficit makes any sense whatsoever. Second, let's face it. While 1/3 of middle-income America gets benefits from that tax bill, primarily the wealthy of this nation, the well-to-do, get major benefits. 16% of the benefits go to the top 0.5% of our population. I had the chief executive officer of one of the major corporations of our country in my office, and when he was finished talking about a problem they have in Illinois, I turned to him and I said, how should I vote on the tax bill? And he said, you know, we have a special break in there for my industry. And I said, I understand that, but that's not answering my question. And he was silent for a moment, and then he said, I'd vote against it. And I said, why? And he said, number one, you're going to discourage the manufacturing base of this country. And incidentally, he's right on this. When you, for example, cut back the deduction on research in this country, I cannot believe anyone believes we can build a better, finer America by cutting back on research in this country. It simply cannot happen. But the second point he made, he said, my salary, and it's a matter of public record, is $1.5 million a year. He said, I had my accountant refigure my taxes. You're going to hand me $250,000. And he said, if you want to hand me $250,000, I'll take it. But with a $200 billion deficit, I don't think it makes sense. And so I voted against the bill. Now, whether it's right, whether my stand was wrong, I think the point is we have to stand up, we have to have conviction, and if we simply follow the winds, we're not going to win, and we should not win. The second thing we have to have is compassion. Talking to somebody here about what he was doing for the retarded in this state. My friend, we test whether we're a civilized society not by how we treat the rich and the powerful, but how we help people who really need help. And one of these areas where there is a problem, it is much less a problem in your state, because you have a good fortune of not having a lot of unemployment. And that's this whole area of jobs. Nationally, we're just below 7% unemployment. What was once considered an intolerable unemployment rate is now considered an unattainable unemployment rate. Your unemployment rate, I had someone check it out, was 3.7% in July. But I would point out these things tend to be cyclical. And before you get too comfortable in New Hampshire, remember that in July of 1976, it was 7.3%. 10 years ago, the South, the Sun Belt, was booming. Today, 12 of the 19 states in the Sun Belt have above average national employment. And even 3.7%. You know what the unemployment rate is in Switzerland? And I check Switzerland because when I think of New Hampshire, you're kind of the Switzerland of this country. Unemployment rate in Switzerland is less than 1%. The unemployment rate in Japan, about 2%. The countries that have less unemployment than we do include Italy, Austria, Sweden, a whole raft of countries. We're not just talking about statistics. You're talking about a man in Hanover Park, Illinois, a relatively wealthy Chicago suburb who called me not too far from you, Mayor, your old hometown, called me on the phone the other day. He's 53 years old, says I can't get a job, said his daughter who wants to go to college is threatening to commit suicide, and he said, does anyone care? And the implication was not a question, but that no one does care. I think of a couple, Earl and Linda Donahue, down in rural Hardin County, Illinois, came up to me on a cold day down there, desperate for a job. I said, if I could get you a part-time job in Harrisburg, 30 miles away, could you get there? And he said, I'd get there somehow. He said, I'd have to hitchhike maybe because the tires in our car are so bad. Don't know that we could get there. They have 3 children, 16, 13, and 10, as I recall, one of them handicapped. It was a cold day when I was down there. I said, how do you heat your house? He said, we bought an old second-hand wood stove, and my wife and kids and I walk along the highway and pick up wood along the highway. That's real life for a lot of people in this country today. And yet we have all kinds of needs. We have 45% of the bridges in this country, for example, that need to be fixed. I'm sure some of them in New Hampshire. I'm sure you people know that better than I do. I've never been in a community in this state, Mayor, you'll forgive me, probably including your community, where we don't have sidewalks that need to be repaired. We have 7 million Americans who don't have telephones in this home. You know, we take it for granted now that electricity is there, that you have clean water. 7 million Americans can't call a doctor if someone has a heart attack, can't call the police if someone breaks into their home, can't call the fire department if a fire breaks out. I think this good, great, rich country could meet that kind of a need. Let the rest of us pay just a couple of percent maybe on our long distance calls to take care of it. We have to be a party of compassion. Second, we have to be a party of good managers. The best record on the deficit since World War II was by a Democratic president named Harry Truman. The worst record by far is a fellow named Ronald Reagan, who's piled up who has piled up more deficits than all the presidents from George Washington through Jimmy Carter combined. And I think here in New Hampshire, where I think of your fiscal prudence, your common sense, your independence, I think this is a good place for a pay-as-you-go Democrat like Paul Simon to come and say, we got to change things. And I criticize Ronald Reagan, and we should criticize him, but let's face it, the Democratic record in this area has not been all it should be either. Let me just get, and I don't want to load you down with statistics, but just a couple. Most of us in here remember when John F. Kennedy was President of the United States. Fiscal year 1962 we had a total federal budget for the first time of $100 billion. This next fiscal year, which will start 3 days from now, we're going to spend approximately $207 billion on interest alone. For the past 6 years, this is the growth in our budget. Defense has grown 88%, entitlements like Social Security 56%, discretionary non-defense 20%, interest has grown 240%. The last 3 years, we have moved from being the #1 creditor nation in the world to being the #1 debtor nation in the world. This year, 60% of the indebtedness of this country is being purchased by people outside of our country. You can go to your banker maybe 1 year and say, I'd like to borrow money because we're spending 1/4 more than we're taking in. Your banker may help you 1 year or 2 years. But at some point, your banker is going to say, hold off. And at some point, the international bankers are going to say the same thing to us. Talked to Russ Burney here today, and he said, we're living on a national credit card. And he is absolutely right. And let me just add, you people are all involved in this too, if I can put it on your shoulders a little bit. I remember when I got elected to the state legislature in Illinois, got a letter from a man in South Roxana, Illinois. I'm sure you all know where that is. And he had 13 points to his letter. The first 12 were increased services he wanted from government, and the 13th point was cut taxes. And believe it or not, we've almost adopted his program. You're involved to this extent, and that is that when you write a letter to me or to others in government, if in the first paragraph, whether it's the state legislature, or U.S. Congress, or where, if in the first paragraph of that letter you ask for an increased service, then add a second paragraph and say, I'm willing to pay the taxes. And if you don't have the courage to write the second paragraph, don't write the first paragraph. Very simple. And finally, I think we have to be a party of vision. One of the great things that John F. Kennedy did for all of us, he lifted our vision. One of the great disservices of this administration is that we're bogged down in fighting for the status quo. I'll give you a good example. I mentioned this higher education vote that one of your House members cast. I was involved in that conference committee. And you know what? I'm involved in the fight for the status quo. But there is no such thing as status quo. Whether you're Mrs. Peabody or Cindy or who you are, you're either moving ahead or you're slipping back. And the same is true for a nation. And to move ahead, we have to dream once again about building a better New Hampshire, about building a better nation, about building a better world. What do we do? Well, among other things, we have to stop this drift toward acceptance of sliding expectations. I understand a national network said last week, I didn't happen to see it, that of those under the age of 30, more than half will never own their own homes in this country. There are those who say we can't do anything about educational problems we have, unemployment problems. We can't do anything about a shrinking middle-income America. My friends, I don't believe that for one moment. What we have to do is to dream and to work for those dreams. At the end of this century, at the beginning of this century, the average lifespan in the United States of America was 47 years. 1936, it reached 58 years, and I was reading a speech the other day by a member of Congress who served then, and he said, that's about as high as we can ever go. Fortunately, some people dreamed, and today we have a life expectancy of better than 74 years. We have to dream about about all kinds of things. Let me just mention two areas. Education. Illiteracy. 23 million functionally illiterate adult Americans. People who can read a stop sign, but they can't fill out an employment form, they can't address an envelope, perhaps worst of all, they can't help their kids with their schoolwork. Helping the handicapped. I mentioned the retarded before. We passed, and I was pleased to be a sponsor of something called 94-142 back some years ago that gives handicapped young people a chance in this country, mandated an education for them. We had hearings, we had the head of the agency and the technical experts. Then we had one powerful witness, a young man by the name of Ed Akerley, 14 years old. Happens to be an autistic child. When we passed that bill, he couldn't speak a word. But under the bill, he had to be diagnosed. The doctor said, this young man can be taught to speak. And he learned how to speak, and he still speaks with an accent. He came in and told us his story. When he finished, I said to him, Ed, what would you like to become? He said, I'd like to become an electrician. Then I said to him, what else would you like to do? And he said, you mean when I grow up? And I said, yes. He said, I'd like to get married, have a family, live in a little white house with a white fence. Now, my friends, if you follow the wishes of this administration, you cut back on the opportunities for the Ed Akerleys of this world. And you can save money if you do it. Just like you save money when you build a house and you don't put a roof on it. You save money, but you save it only temporarily. We simply have to move ahead, and not simply for the handicapped or illiteracy. We have to have quality education, and let me add, we have to demand more of ourselves. We have the only nation on the face of the earth where you can go through grade school, high school, college, get a PhD, never have a year of a foreign language. You graduate from secondary school in the Soviet Union, you have 4 years of physics. 16% of those who graduate from high school in the United States have 1 year of physics. Believe it or not, we have more school districts in the United States than we have physics teachers. We're going to have to do more. In Japan, teachers are in the top 10% of the nation in terms of income. The United States teachers are just barely above the average. I talked to a teachers institute or teachers group, 500 teachers there, and I'll say, how many of you want your sons and daughters to become teachers? And there'll be about 5 or 6 hands raised. If we want to move ahead in education, we're going to have to prize teachers more highly. Well, fine. Last point, and then I will stop, believe it or not. I do have my watch out here, George. And that is an area that I know is not a real vital issue for a lot of people. But let me tell you, it really is ultimately the most important issue, and that is moving ahead in arms control. We have to be a party that stands for that. I didn't understand what kind of a world we were living in, really, until about 5 years ago. Some of you will remember this. Down in Arkansas, an Air Force sergeant was walking along, accidentally dropped a wrench, fell through some boards, broke a little aluminum tube, and a Titan II missile went up in the air, landed in a wooded field some miles away. The warhead did not explode, but the newspapers reported it was a 9-megaton warhead. I got thinking, you know, Norm, I don't understand what 9 megatons is. So I asked our Congressional Research Service, I said, tell me in terms I can understand what 9 megatons is. They gave me 2 answers. One is if you take all the bombs of World War II, including Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they totaled 2 megatons. Or number 2, if you read in Lebanon or El Salvador or someplace about a car blowing up, ordinarily that is 1 or 2 or 3 pounds of TNT. In TNT equivalency terms, a megaton is a railroad freight train loaded with TNT 300 miles long. 9 megatons, 2,700 miles long, almost from Manchester, New Hampshire to Portland, Oregon. The United States has about 10,500 of these large strategic warheads. Soviets have about 9,500. We have, in addition, between us about 30,000 smaller, what we call tactical nuclear warheads. We have the ability, beyond any question, to, in a matter of hours, create a world where never again is the laughter of a child going to be heard. Never again is a deer going to run through a forest in New Hampshire. And somehow we have to move away from that. And ours ought to be a party that leads in that effort, and we should not compromise as we move in that direction. Let me close by telling you one small story. This happened while Norm was still in the House of Representatives. Back a few years ago, for the first time in the history of the House, we invited a senator to come and speak to the House. You don't know how demeaning that is to the House to have a senator come and speak there. But the senator who was invited to speak was a senator who was loved by people in both political parties. His name was Hubert Humphrey. It was about 8 weeks before he died. He knew he was dying, and we knew he was dying. And he got up, and I remember Luke, the old doorkeeper, telling me, said, I've been here 30 years. I've heard kings and presidents and prime ministers welcomed. Never heard anyone receive an ovation like that. And I remember our colleague, former colleague, Joe Fisher from Virginia, saying to me, he said, I had tears running down my cheeks. I didn't want to look to my right or left because I didn't want my colleagues to know, but I found out afterwards we were all in the same boat. But Hubert Humphrey got up and he had no prepared text in front of him. But among other things, he said this: so far as we know in this whole vast universe, the only place where God has given life is this small planet of the earth. And you and I are engaged in an experiment whether we can have peace and freedom and justice and opportunity on that small planet. And that, my friends, is what the ball game is really all about. You do not build that structure of peace and freedom and justice and opportunity with some single dramatic gesture in Washington, the United Nations, or Moscow. You build it brick by brick by brick. And here in New Hampshire, because of an unusual set of circumstances that you have a much greater influence on how and whether we put that structure together. I wish you the best in your important task. Thank you very much.
Well, as I said, anybody who can win in the 12th District of Illinois is a pretty good Democrat. So, next I wanted to introduce another great Democrat, Romy Dorval, who's I saw here in front, and he's right here, who's been the state party chair and done everything for the party for a long time. And he is going to make some awards to active Democrats, and here's Romy.
Thank you, Mayor Donches. First, I'd like to call upon Scott McGuffin to come before you to make a presentation on behalf of the Merrimack County Democratic Committee. Scott?
Mayor Donches, honored guests, it's a pleasure to be before you today in order to present on behalf of Merrimack County Democrats an award which is in the name of Eugene Danielle. As many of you are aware, Jean Danielle for years has represented the Franklin area and New Hampshire generally in the political process. And 1 year ago, Merrimack County Democrats decided that his example, his tenacity, his participatory interest in democratic politics deserved to be recognized and passed on year to year. This year it's great pleasure to present that award on behalf of Merrimack County Democratic Committee. First, I'd like to ask that Jean Danielle stand and be recognized. Jean, as you can tell by the applause, you are well recognized and respected in this state. And in keeping with that theme, I'd like to present the award this year, and I will read it to you. A resolution as follows. Whereas the Eugene S. Danielle Jr. Award was established in 1985 for the following purpose: to provide for and encourage public recognition of outstanding public service by an individual or individuals who, through their efforts and involvement in public affairs, have made a substantial and noteworthy contribution to the enhancement of the quality of life of the state of New Hampshire. And whereas Eva Sartwell has given unceasingly of her time, effort, and diligence in the furtherance of women's equality, particularly in recognition of comparable worth. And whereas Eva Sartwell has exemplified the finest ideals of unionism through her long and faithful espousal of the AFL-CIO principles, and whereas Eva Sartwell has worked diligently to promote the election of liberal candidates at the national and local levels, and whereas Eva Sartwell has served with merit and distinction on the Merrimack County Democratic Committee and the State Democratic Committee, and has been an active leader and officer with exemplary service on the Concord City Democratic Committee. And whereas Eva Sartwell's personal, professional, and political life has epitomized the finest principles of compassion, devotion, and understanding toward the bettering and of the well-being of humanity. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Merrimack County Democratic Committee is proud to present the Eugene S. Danielle Award to Eva M. Sartwell of Concord, New Hampshire. I make note to the assembled body that Eva is unable to be with us today because of family commitments. Accepting the award on behalf of Eva today is the outgoing city chair, John Howard.
Thank you very much, Scott, and congratulations to Eva Sartwell. The resolutions and the platform that we elect or vote today remains the responsibility of those members of the legislature to pass. So that at this moment, I would like to pause briefly to recognize those members of the legislature who have passed away this year. And I'd like to ask my co-chairperson, Mary Nelson, to name them, so if you please pause for a moment.
Representative Lafayette Bergeron, Hillsborough County 47, two-term representative. Representative Wilfred Burkish, Hillsborough County 43, 4 terms. Representative Thomas P. Connors, Sr., Rockingham 28, 9 terms. Representative Lawrence Cronin, Hillsborough County 38, 3 terms.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to call on Chairman George Bruno, who will make a presentation of a special award. George?
When you're chairman of the New Hampshire Democratic Party and just a country lawyer, you need all the help you can get. And our next two recipients have been of enormous help to me and enormous help to our party during the past 2 years. Collectively, they have organized party conventions, guided candidates and office holders, drafted more press releases, financial plans, fundraising letters than I would care to mention. And they are respected leaders both in New Hampshire and across the nation. They are wise, smart, never modest, sometimes irreverent, and Democrats to the core. They are brothers and come closest to New Hampshire's equivalent of the political family. I am proud to present the 1986 Chairman's Award to Philip and Joseph Grammickson.
Joe is so modest that he's shy in coming up here to accept it. Get up here, Joe. And Philip was here, so I'll have him accept on behalf of Philip also.
George, I wasn't listening. It's terrible to go but I didn't hear what you were saying. No. I am very, very pleased. And I truthfully wish, yeah, whatever he said. On behalf of my brother, you can tell we knew he would have stayed had he known. We want to thank you very, very, very much. I guess I find it very easy being a Democrat. It goes back to my dad in terms of the things that he used to tell us around the dinner table, where we spent a disproportionate amount of time, about what our responsibilities were to community and to people. My folks always have encouraged their sons to be active in politics and in government and in the Democratic Party. And therefore, the message that Paul Simon made earlier hopefully was a similar message that we learned through our upbringing. The New Hampshire Democratic Party has a marvelous opportunity to pick up on Paul's message as it relates to what we're going to be telling the nation 15, 18 months from now in terms of the direction. One of the things that Philip and I have always been very, very, very lucky for is to have people, friends and neighbors, yourselves, who have been able to ask for help. And we want to thank you for this award and for being our friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. The convention wouldn't have been complete without hearing from you. The Leadership Award has been established this year as we recognize two outstanding individuals who, by their deeds, have formed a role model that we should all be proud and eager to imitate. The first recipient of the Leadership Award is a native of New Hampshire who, at the ripe old age of 23, won a trip to the New Hampshire House of Representatives and enjoyed it enough to serve 3 additional terms. Then he did manage between sessions to raise a family and to attend the University of New Hampshire, where he obtained a degree in business administration. During this time, he was also very active in state and county affairs, serving as its county chairman from 1976 to 1980. 2 years ago, when our party experienced very difficult moments, he stepped forward to be elected the state Senate Minority Leader and established a full-time office with a strong Democratic presence in the state capitol. He has devoted himself in representing the Democratic perspective in all of his political endeavors and has worked long and hard in recruiting candidates who are currently running for the state Senate. It is with distinct pleasure and honor to present the Leadership Award to Senator Leo Lassard.
Chris remembers my first haircut. He insisted upon it before I was elected to the House in 1973. I really am at a loss for words. I am speechless, but I'll try. The fact is that sometimes I think I served in the legislature too long. I served for a few years while Mel Thompson served as our governor, and 4 years while Hugh Gallen was our governor, and the current 2 terms of our incumbent governor. So I have seen the best and I have seen the worst. And as bad as things were under Mel Thompson, and they could be pretty bad, they're even worse now. If I have a regret over all that time, I think that it would be that I didn't support Hugh Gallen more. You know, as Democrats, we frequently are like a family. We fight vigorously amongst one another to fight for our point of view around the dinner table. And Hugh Gallen, whose heart was in the right place, whose legislative package I sponsored a portion of, was really correct, whose leadership and inspiration was such that I really couldn't quarrel with. And when I think back on the issues that we took each other to task on, it seems incredible in light of Governor Sununu today. You know, Hugh Gallen, after the Thompson administration, tried desperately to take politics out of the university system. He sponsored the toughest hazardous waste law in the nation. He was concerned about our environment, and he opposed Seabrook. And when you look that we've gone 180 degrees from that time with his present governor, it's a pretty sad situation. So I want you to know that while I'm taking a sabbatical from politics, I love this party. I love the people that I've served with, and I look forward to working with you in the future, and I'm very grateful for this award. Thank you.
Hello. I'm very fortunate to be up here to present this next award. And they also said I need practice for the state Senate race. No, that's not to take away from this next award. I also have the privilege of presenting the next Leadership Award. It's hard to see with this mic. Okay. The next Leadership Award is presented to a young man who began his leadership career service in the United States Army as a commissioned officer from 1963 to 1967. Following the attainment of a law degree in 1972 and the establishment of a successful law practice in 1979, he served 1 term in the State House of Representatives and subsequently served 2 terms in the State Senate as the Deputy Minority Leader. While in the Senate, he mustered the time and energy to serve the New Hampshire State Democratic Party as a chairman, Daniel Webster College as a trustee and the chairman of the board, the Boys Club of Greater Nashua as a director, and the president in 1981, and as a director of the Southern New Hampshire Association of Business and Industry. More recently, this quality person was widely considered to be a formidable candidate for governor, but fell victim to a recurring severe back ailment which prevented him from seeking a cherished goal. He has always been recognized in the front of the activities, and it is with sincere hope that he will overcome his setback and return to the political arena in due time, where he has been an exemplary example. My fellow Democrats, it is with great pride and honor that we present this next award to Senator Richard Boyd of District 13.
I think I have some hay fever. A little difficult. Mary, first of all, it is really flattering to be mentioned as a formidable candidate when you have people like Chris Burrow, who served our party for so many years and continues and did what Senator Simon says, did what was right, and really at the sake of losing. Then you have Paul McEachran, Bruce Anderson, and Paul Gagnon, who run this last time, and Paul carrying the banner for the party. And Paul's absolutely right with that issue. And I just hope if he loses, the state will lose. It won't be because Paul hasn't talked about the right issue and hasn't been talking about it for years. If it becomes a referendum on Seabrook, then Paul McEachran will be our next governor. And Paul, you certainly have my support, and I want to see that happen very, very much. Beyond that, like Leo, I've served in the legislature a few years, seen the worst, and I'll have to tell you that Governor Sununu is smoke and mirrors, and nothing worse has happened to our state. And he hasn't been willing to do what Senator Simon says, and that is say no to the programs or come up with the money. He's been doing both, and I've seen it happen. I was one of the few that continued to vote against his budgets because of that. He has represented himself to the state of New Hampshire as being something he is not. We've got bigger government here than we had before. The people in New Hampshire have an insidious tax that they've never had before, and that's Seabrook. Obviously, the governor's office touches me deeply. And somebody mentioned about retiring. I guess at 42, you don't think about retiring until somebody says it to you, and then all of a sudden you become a little defensive. I guess, I don't know if I'll run for office again, but I don't think I've retired, at any rate. I guess that a couple of things. I went to an Eagle Scout ceremony that we have occasion to do. And one of the things that comes through with all of that is to do your best. And I guess that sometimes when I got into trouble, well, which was frequently according to some, it was because I didn't do my best. And particularly, you know, I guess if you leave the results to God, they say, and just do your best at each task, you're going to be okay. Sometimes I got a little too involved in trying to control the results and forgot about doing my best, and I think that's when I got into trouble most of the time. I suspect that I'm getting this as for the times I did my best, and I appreciate you for remembering those times. Finally, obviously all those things that they talk about, whether it was trustee or president of this organization or that organization, it wouldn't have happened without tremendous sacrifice. Not on my part, because if I wasn't doing this, I'd be doing something else. The sacrifice on the part of my family, particularly my wife Karen. I'd like you to stand up, Karen. You only realize that, you see, when you go back home and you see the child that you thought was 7 who's now 15, and the child who's now 13 who you thought was 6. Somebody asked me if I missed all this. I like to think it's not an either-or thing. Yes, I do to a certain extent, but I'll tell you, I really am enjoying being with the family and doing those things. I think there's a very big role for me here. I've been flattered to be asked to help with Mary's campaign and Chubb's, and I certainly will be helping the congressional candidates and Paul. And that's the way I like to feel my role is going to be in the future. And if you need any wills or estate planning, think of me, will you please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. We have 2 more awards to present, and the first is that of the Most Valuable Player Award of the Year. It is presented annually to the Democrat who has contributed of his time and energy with great dedication to the party cause over and above the normal course of activity. Past recipients have been in 1984, Chris Dermer and Stephanie Powers, in 1985, Don and Ethel Murphy, and Kathy Muirhead. This year, among a host of nominees, your committee has selected 2 most worthy individuals. The first recipient has involved herself in a myriad of party activities that stand as a challenge to us all. She has served as chairperson of her hometown party committee, campaign chairman of her city's mayor, manager of the 2nd Congressional District Office, and is presently engaged in a key role in the election of a senator from her district. She was chairperson of a very successful fundraiser for the state party this year, and as a current state party officer, she has spent countless hours in the fulfillment of her duties and the activities of the state committee office. It is with pleasure that we present the first Most Valuable Player of the Year award to Anita Friedman. Would you? There she is right here.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be a Democrat, and I'm Demor's Party now, and I love it, and I'm going to keep on forever. Thank you. I'll keep right and proud of you.
I have the distinct honor of presenting the next Most Valuable Player Year of the Award. Oh my heavens. You can see I need the practice. Let's start again. I do have the honor of presenting the Most Valuable Player of the Year award, and I can tell you personally that it truly is an honor. The selection of the next recipient was an easy one, as you will soon learn. So easy that we simply copied his qualifications from a nomination letter, and we received many letters. This individual has been an outstanding worker at his town's level. Always has been involved in the campaigns of individual candidates, and has always done many times more the work than was necessary without ever taking any credit, accolades, or recognition. Most recently, his work has been with the Computer Voter File Project, which he has tirelessly done over the last months. This will result in a computer printout and information which will prove invaluable to the candidates, to the state committee, and to the Dollars for Democrats campaign. It is with great pleasure that we present the Most Valuable Player Award to Mr. Keith Wrigley.
computer expert is nobody expects you to be able to make a speech. And I think that's probably what I should do, but I have to say a little bit. This is not really just for me. I don't know how many hundred people have gotten involved in this stuff. And it goes back, I think, I was talking to Nancy Richard Stour a while back. We started this about 2 years ago, something like that. The support we've gotten, Joe Keefe pulled it out when the chairman of this computer committee left. Joe Keefe and Dan DuPont pulled it out. Mary Nelson and Mary Chambers pulled it out at an executive committee meeting not too long ago. It's 100 people. Anyway, thank all of them and all of you.
Thank you, Chief. Finally, we come to the famous Hall of Fame Award. This award is presented to the Democrat who is easily identifiable and who over the years has consistently played an outstanding role over and above the normal course of activity as a leader and a contributor in strengthening the Democratic Party. Past recipients have been in 1984, Bill Dunphy, Celia Wynn, who is sitting before me, J. Wilcox Brown, and the late Governor Hugh Gallen. In 1985, we honored former U.S. Senator Thomas McIntyre. These names have been inscribed on a permanent Hall of Fame plaque, which is displayed in the State Committee office. This year, in keeping with this established tradition, your committee has selected two most worthy recipients. We single out today for entry to the State Democratic Party Hall of Fame an individual whose name is most familiar to us all. She began her public career by being elected to 2 terms in the state legislature and was the only woman in state history to be elected to the Executive Council for 4 consecutive terms. She early attained statewide notoriety by her valiant efforts to stave off Aristotle Onassis' attempt to mar our limited shores with oil refineries. She was the first elected official to oppose the construction of the dastardly Seabrook project. She was this party's nominee to retain the Democratic seat in the 2nd Congressional District in 1984. She continues even today to support those candidates whose views and ideals she staunchly believes in and fights for. She's a person of strong convictions, dedicated to preserve the environment of the state of New Hampshire, the rights of its citizens, and the philosophy of the Democratic Party. It is with great pleasure that we present the Hall of Fame Award to Dudley Dudley. Unfortunately, Dudley could not be with us today, and I've asked Elaine Prasker to accept the award on her behalf.
Thank you very much on Dudley's behalf. It's an honor for me to be here to accept this award, which places her in such illustrious company with such very fine and important Democrats. I know you all share with me the regret that Dudley isn't here today for her to feel your warmth and to know the esteem with which you hold her. As Senator Simon was talking about the attributes that are so necessary for us to exemplify as Democrats, I couldn't help thinking that he was really talking about Dudley. Dudley, ever since I've known her, and this is long before she ever participated in public life, always had the strength of her convictions and the courage to say exactly what was right, whether it was popular or not. She was the leader in saying no to